I will show you how to create trees you can chop down and then add them to your tile map scene collection for easy use in any scene. We will also cover hit and hurt components to apply damage when using the axe tool, and create reusable collectible components to gather logs and other interactable items. Let's begin by creating a new test scene. We'll just take the test scene default in the scenes and tests folder, and let's just duplicate this. Let's just call it test scene, objects and trees, and let's open the scene. So we'll use this test scene just to try out our trees once we've created them. And in the scenes folder, let's create a new folder and call this object. And then inside that folder, we'll create a new folder and call this tree. So go scene, new scene, other node, search for sprite 2D, and then click create. We will rename this node to small tree, and then just save the scene. Go to the scenes folder, objects, trees, and then save the scene. So click on small tree, and in the texture, let's add a new atlas texture. Then go to assets, game and objects folder, and in that folder you'll have a basic grass and biome thing. So let's just drop that asset onto the atlas. Then scroll down and choose edit region, and we'll just zoom in. So we want this tree here. Let's just choose grid snap, and we'll zoom in, and we want to just take this tree here. Let's just close that and then zoom in, and we have our asset here. Now let's reposition the asset. If we just click the up arrow, we can transform the Y position. So we can see that the Y axis is increasing on the transform. Let's add another child node to the small tree. So add child node, then search for static body 2D. Add another child node, and this time search for collision shape 2D. And in the shape parameter, let's just choose this circle parameter. Let's just reduce the size of that, and then just drag that and just position it over the base of the tree. So we would like our player to collide with the collision shape for the static body 2D, but not move through the shape. So this is why we're using a static body 2D, because the player shouldn't be able to move through that collision shape. So let's just check on static body 2D, and we will keep the layer on ground. So if we just look at the layer names once more, we have ground, player and interactable. Let's now add the small tree to our test scene. So in the test folder, open up the test scene objects trees scene, and then in the game tile map, let's add a new tile map layer. So say add child node and search for tile map layer, and then add that layer. In tile map layer, let's rename this to trees, and in the tile set, let's just load the game tile set and open that. Click on the tile set, and with the tile set option selected at the bottom, let's then go to our objects and trees folder, and let's add our scene. So we can click the plus button here and go scenes, objects, trees and small tree, or you can click and drag it. Once we've added that, go to tile map, and then on the trees layer, let's just click the small tree, and let's just start to add those trees. Then let's add the player to the scene. So we can just grab the player, just add the player to the scene, and then just add child node, and just quickly add a camera 2D. Then just make sure the player is below the tile map here. And with the player set up, let's test our scene. So go to debug and just switch on visible collision shapes, and then test the scene. And as you can see, the player cannot walk through the collision shape because of the static body 2D. However, let's just try and walk behind the tree. And as you can see, the player just walks over the top of the tree, and this is because Y-sort is not enabled. However, I'm not going to cover Y-sort in this tutorial. I'm going to cover that in a future tutorial, because I will show you how to perform Y-sort on many different objects at the same time, and why it is better to do it through a test scene, because Y-sorting can be quite tricky. The next step is to create a hit component and a hurt component. The tree will have the hurt component, and when the player has the axe, that will be the hit component, and as it interacts with the hurt component, it will apply damage and then chop the tree down and produce logs. Let's go to scene, new scene, other node, and search for area 2D and create that, and then rename this to hurt component. Let's save the scene, and in the components folder under scenes, we'll save the hurt component here. Now attach a script, and we'll save this as the hurt component GD script and just create that. Let's now give this a class name and call this hurt component. Then add an export variable, which is tool, and then we'll use the data types variables with tools and the enum tools.none. Let's create a signal called onHurt. Then back on the hurt component, just select that and then go to node and choose area entered, and then just connect that. So click connect here. Now to create the hit component, go scene, new scene, other node, and we want another area 2D. So create that and then rename the node to hit component. Let's save the scene and save that also in the components folder. Click save, and then let's attach a script. And we'll also call this hit component GD script and create that script. Then we'll use class name hit component, and then export another variable, which is var current tool, and then we'll use the enum data types tools, and then assign the tools none. Then add another export variable and call this var hit damage, and we'll give it a default value of 1. So as you can see, for the hit component, we derive from area 2D, and we also do the same for the hurt component. You'll see the error message here because it's asking us to configure a collision shape 2D. However, we are going to attach these components to other nodes and scenes, and then we'll attach the collision shape there. So we are deriving from area 2D and making something a little bit more customizable and reusable. So let's go to our player scene and open the player scene. And from the components folder, let's now attach the hit component. So if we just open this up here, let's add the hit component to the player. First, just make sure that the position in the transform is 0 and 0 for the X and Y. And then we can now attach a collision shape. So add another child node and search for collision shape. And we'll create a small circle. Let's change the color so it distinguishes the hit component shape from the player's alternative collision shape for interacting with the ground objects. Let's make this shape smaller and then choose the hit component, and let's add a different collision layer. So if we just edit the collision layer names, in here write tool and click close, and then edit layer names again and write object, then click close. So the collision layer for the hit component should live on the tool layer. So the best place to do that is to actually go back to the hit component here, open the scene, and then add it here. If you add it on here, you can then attach that hit component and keep changing those layers, but we want it on the default actual scene component here. So we'll go in the collision layer, choose tool, and then turn off 1. And in the layer mask, we want it to interact with object layers. So that is layer 5. So if you attach the hit component to any other characters or any other NPCs, you wouldn't actually need to keep selecting the layer and the mask, because we've created our own custom version of the area 2D and called it hit component. And this is one of the benefits of Godot and the node structure. You can create your own custom components which have predefined settings and are extensible from the original node types. So let's head back to the player scene. The next step is to reposition the collision shape based on the direction of the player when we are chopping. So when we are in this state, we need to now modify and move where the collision shape is. Let's open up Animated Sprite 2D, and then let's find chopping right, and then let's choose this animation here and just play that. So we need to move this collision shape so it sits on top of the axe. So let's just move that. And if we look at the collision shape value, we have an X value of 9 and the Y value is 0. So now that we know the transform position for the collision shape. Let's now modify this through the script. So go to the state machine node, and in the chopping state node, choose the script, and let's export another variable. So say @export, and we'll call this variable hit component collision shape, which is of type collision shape 2D. Then create the ready function and say hit component collision shape dot disabled, and we'll set this to true by default. Then hit component collision shape dot position vector 2 with x and y as 0, and scroll down to the onEnter method. And when the onEnter function is called, let's get the hit component collision shape and set disabled to false to activate the collision shape. When we then exit, we want to say hit component collision shape and then set disabled back to true. And then also in onEnter method, when the player direction is facing right, get the hit component collision shape and set the position to vector 2, x, 9 and y 0, which is the transform position here. Now we can then reset this back to 0, 0, which is the starting position. And when the player direction is facing left, we can do the same thing except use -9 for the x variable. So hit component collision shape dot position equals vector 2, -9 and 0. And this inverts the x, so we've got 9 for right and -9 for left. So we just need to set the position for the player direction facing up and the player direction facing down. So go back to the player and change the animation again. So we'll go chopping front and then just play the animation and then just position the collision shape into the correct place. So we've got x is 0 and y is 3. Do the same for facing up. So chopping back. And we can say that x is 0 and y is -18. Let's just reset those. And once we've reset the values, let's go back to our chopping state script and then update these values. So chopping back. And that just updates the position for the hit collision shape. So now choose the hit component collision shape and just rename this as hit component collision shape 2D. Then choose the chopping state node, and we just need to assign this collision shape to our export variable in the hit component. Then head over to the test scene. We'll just check again that visible collision shapes are on. Go to the test scene, and on the player node, just make sure that we choose the axe as the current tool. And then let's click the test scene. And then as we click the mouse, we can see the collision shape move, and also as it turns red is active, and then we've got up and then down. So what we now need to do is when we go to the tree and click to activate the tool, it should then start to chop the tree. Let's just stop this. So go back to the hit component and let's just finish the onAreaEntered method. And we want to say var hit component equals area as a hit component. If tool equals, and then we can say hit component, and because we've made this as a custom component, we have access to its properties. So we've got current tool, then we can call the signal and emit hit component, and then the amount of damage that that hit component can emit. So head back over to small tree, and in this scene, let's add hit component. So we'll go back to the components folder and then just add the hit component as a node. And then this is where we can now add our collision shape. Let's add the child node, and then for collision shape 2D, let's just create that. But for this, we'll choose a rectangle shape and then change the color to distinguish it. Then let's just resize it for the tree and just save that. Let's just rename the collision shape to hit component collision shape. And then we just need to check the physics layers. So we're not going to change them here because we've added that to the small tree. We'll actually go into the hit component because this is the custom one. Click that, and then let's just set the layers. So we have ground layer. So this is object, and we're going to mask the tool. And you'll see that that is the inverse of the hit component. Let's create another reusable component which manages our damage. So I'll go scene, new scene, and we'll just use a standard 2D node for this. And we'll just call this damage component, save the scene, and choose the components folder, which is under scenes, save that, and then attach another script. And we'll just call that damage component script and then create that. We'll click the damage component script and then call this class name damage component. Add an export variable, which is maximum damage, and we'll just set this to 1. That's just the default. Add another export variable, and we'll call this current damage, which is just set to 0. Then let's add a signal, and we'll call this max damage reached, and create a function. We'll call this apply damage, and we'll pass in an integer of damage, and we'll just return it as a void. Then we want to set the current damage, and we do this by clamping the current damage with the damage value that's coming in, so that we don't end up with the current damage more than our max damage. Then we can say if current damage equals maximum damage, then let's emit our signal. Now head back over to small tree and add the damage component to our small tree. And let's set the variable. So the maximum damage for the small tree, let's set that to 3. Now we've almost finished the small tree scene. What we just need to do is link up the signals which we've got from our reusable components. So let's just go small tree and then let's add a script. Let's save the script as small tree and then create that. So click the hurt component and damage component, so they're both selected, then hold Control down and then add them into the editor here. So we've got 2 onReady variables. Then add the ready function, and then we can get the hurt component and then connect the signal. So say function on hurt, and then it's hit damage with a return type of void. Then once we receive the hit damage, we just need to pass that into the damage component. So we can say damage component apply damage and just pass in the hit damage. So on the hurt signal, just need to add the connect method, and that will just connect that up. Then let's complete our damage component signal. So we say damage component, max damage reached, and then connect that. So we'll say on max damage reach, then create the function. And here we just want to print and then Q3 to remove the scene. I'm just going to go back to the hurt component and just update this method. So I'll just call it hurt and go back to damage component and then go back to the small tree script, just modify that. And then just make one more check for the hurt component here. So let's just check the signal because I did update that, and then just also rename that back to hurt so that it's got the correct signal name. Now let's head back over to our small tree scene, and we've now completed the script. So let's go to our test scene, objects and trees, and let's just run our scene. We'll leave visible collision shapes on for the moment, and then let's just move the game window up, and then we'll just hit the axe. So 1, 2, 3. And you can see that max damage has reached. And we'll just do that one more time for one of the other trees. So say 1, 2, 3. So now what we need to do is to instantiate a log when the tree has been chopped down. So to create the log scene, go to scene, new scene, other node, and search for sprite 2D. Let's rename the node to be log and save the scene. Go to the scenes folder, objects, trees, and save the log scene here. Then in the texture, choose Atlas texture and just open that. And then in the Atlas texture, let's just add a new texture. So go back to our game assets here, and under objects, bring over the basic grass biome things. Then in edit region, with grid snap selected, zoom in and then choose the grid round this log here. Just click close, and then let's zoom in on our sprite. And now we're going to create another custom component which we can use to collect the log. So this can be then reusable. So go to scene, new scene, other node and search for area 2D again and rename this to Collectable Component. Let's save that. We'll put this into the Components folder under Scenes and save. Then attach a script and save that as Collectible Component script and create. In the script, we want to call this class name Collectible Component. And because we may use this on multiple different objects, let's export a variable called collectible name and we'll use a type of string. Then select the collectible component node, choose node, and then select body entered. Let's connect that signal to our script. In the onBodyEntered method, we want to say if body is the player, then we'll print a debug statement. We'll say collected, and then we will get the parent and then free the parent scene. Now, the reason why I'm using get parent is because the collectible will be added to another scene. So with the collectible component selected, go to the inspector and let's just check the collision layer. Now let's use edit layer names and we'll put this onto a collectible layer. So just write collectible and then just close that. So collectible is now layer 6, so let's choose that. And we want the collectible to be seen by the player. So let's then look for the mask, which is player, and that's number 2. Let's head back to the log scene and go to components and add the collectible component scene to the log. Then let's add a child node and search for collision shape 2D. For the shape, let's choose the circle shape and let's just make this a little bit smaller. I'll also make this green. And for the collectible component, I will call the collectible name log. So you can write the text log in here. So now that we've created the log scene, let's go back to small tree, go to small tree script, and then get the variable log scene, use preload method, and then load the log scene. Then in the onMaxDamageReach method, we want to load and add that log scene and then queue free. But if we do that straight away here, we'll get an error. So what we need to do is to use call deferred so that we instantiate and add the log scene on the next frame. So call deferred, and then we use add log scene. So say function add log scene, and then say var log instance equals log scene, then instantiate the log scene, and then we'll just cast that as a node 2D. Then we'll say log instance global position and set that to the global position of the tree node, and use get parent, add child, and then the log instance. So this will add the scene to the parent of the tree node. So now that we've finished the small tree script, let's test the scene. So with visible collision shapes on, let's just run the current scene. Let's go to test scene objects, trees, and run the current scene. So 1, 2, 3, and then the log appears. So you can see that the collectible component is attached, and then let's collect that, and then that disappears. So let's stop that. So now that we've finished the small tree scene, using reusable components, I can now make the large tree scene. I'm now going to develop this and speed up the video, so stay tuned and you can see the progress. So now we can test the scene, and we've got the large trees and small trees which are now added to our tile map, and then I can just start to axe the tree and collect the log. Now that brings us to the end of this tutorial on how to create tree scenes with reusable components so that you can apply damage and chop the tree down and then use a collectible to collect the logs. In the next tutorial, I will show you how to make the tree shake using a shader when the player axes the tree. So please hit like and subscribe and receive notifications of all my future tutorials. Thank you for watching.